Help Desk YouTube video series. I'm Big J.
I'm Little J.
And today we're going to talk about NDT, Neurodevelopmental Treatment, via the BOBAD, because that's the people who came up with it. All right, so let's back up, because when do you use that? In most cases, it is a sensory motor, and it's a traditional sensory motor technique, although a lot of the hoo-ha today gets into the whole concept of being functional, which is nice. Everybody's jumping on that, but it's not motor learning, okay? Motor learning, we know the difference between those two, right? Motor learning is you gotta have a volitional element, to do this, but with NDT, you don't.
Right.
Okay, NDT, many times somebody has, attention deficit disorder, neglect, okay, and you have to be the one positioning them and using it. So in NDT, we use reflex-inhibiting positions and then handling positions. And what we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna do it as an intervention, okay? And we're going to make sure that you understand the premise of what it is, okay, and how to apply it, okay, to a client.
All right.
Hello again, here we are. Well, now we're going to talk about NDT, Neurodevelopmental Treatment. I went and got certified in NDT at one point in time, a long time ago, because I came back and I was full steam, but I also found out that there were a lot of issues as to why one technique didn't work, okay? But let's talk about NDT. NDT, okay, is based on reflex-inhibiting positions, okay? The basis is lower extremities flexed, upper extremities extended, upper extremities flexed, lower extremities extended. So at the end of the day, okay, you position your client, okay, so that the reflex is inhibited, versus Brunstrom, who wants to use the reflex. We want to inhibit it. So I'm going to take you through 3 moves that I used, which can be used very easily. Initially, what happens a lot of times is the lower extremities get really tight. And where would they get tight? Well, they're going to get tight in the hamstrings, okay, is where they first get tight, which means the hips are going to get tight, which means at one point in time, flexing versus extending is going to be an issue. So what we want to do is we want to move towards flexion. So what I'll do with the CVA, this being the affected extremity, okay, what I'll do is I'll bring the knees up into a flexed position, and I'm going to work towards getting the hips into a flexed position. And many times you come in and they have that extremity up here like this. What's that called, Joseph, when they're in that position?
The position of contracture.
Position of contracture, which everybody puts their hand like that, and we say, no, you shouldn't be. Okay, so what that does is biceps shortens, okay, and then all of a sudden it pulls in. And you have a reflex, okay, a synergy pattern, or a flexor, synergy pattern. So what we want to do is I have somebody with a significant amount of tone to that extremity, and what I want to do is I want to reduce the tone. Flexion, not good. Flexion, not good. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. We're going to come up and we're going to stretch the lower extremities. I'm not a physical therapist, but this is the process for how we do it, okay? I have to stretch, okay, the hamstrings. And what I'm going to do is bring them back, and they'll be tight. Joseph's hamstrings are tight. Okay, they'll be tight, and what we'll do is this. We're facilitating. The least amount of pressure that you can apply with your hands is best, okay? So we're going to do this. Now at the same time, watch what I'm going to do. When I'm in flex position, I'm going to take the upper extremity, okay, and I'm going to extend it and bring it down. Again, this was what I was taught, both extremities extension. So flexion of the hips and the knees, extension of the shoulder. And I'm facilitating that pattern. Now, initially it might, if it's tight, initially it might not come out, okay? So a lot of times I cheat, okay? I'll put them in a resting handspring so that the thumb is out, and then I'll pull them out into position because you only have so many hands when you're working, okay? But I will stretch the hamstrings, okay, when I'm working with somebody, and then I will break up patterns, okay, by going side to side, okay, and moving the hips, all right? And again, that's going to loosen up the hamstrings, right? So that when they are sitting, because I'm gonna have him sitting in a little bit, he'll be able to reach forward, okay, and extend his arms. And then we'll be able to position, okay, and ultimately set him up so that he can use his arms functionally, okay? So again, that's one way of doing it, okay? That's the first way. Okay, so now we just came from lying supine and with our legs flexed and working on extension of the extremities to, I'll take a client who's had a stroke and I'll sit them on the edge of a plinth table or the bed, whichever. As long as my feet are touching the floor, I'm happy, okay? Because I need that facilitatory input to the knees and to the hips is where we're getting it. So what happens here in this particular case, and Joseph's not doing what a CVA would be doing, because the CVA probably, the affected extremity would probably be leaning to this side, okay? So I'm gonna facilitate, not using rude technique right now, I'm gonna use NDT.
Right.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I have knees bent, hips bent, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to facilitate by pulling the thumb out, okay? And I'm gonna illustrate this and then explain that it doesn't always work that way because a lot of times it's hard to, because the patient's gonna break at the elbow. But I always put this arm out and I'll start them by rocking them to this side and forward and coming here. What am I doing? Proprioceptive input, shoulder, elbow, wrist. And I would like to go with as less touch as I can. So what normally ends up happening, as long as, because remember, they probably have tone here, and I probably have them in extension, and I'm able to get them out because the thumb is out, okay, and that's usually the position, and I'm facilitating up underneath the hand, okay? So what'll happen is they'll come this way, and I'll let them break just a little bit initially, and I'll hold, okay, and hold, okay? And what I don't want to do is I don't want to facilitate the biceps. Okay, so I want to stay away from the biceps, so I go below the biceps tendon and I make sure that my hand is actually on the triceps, the insertion of the triceps, which is what I want. I want facilitating through the triceps, okay? I can do a root and start slapping it, but I'm not going to, okay? So this is the technique, and then I'll let it keep an extension and we'll go side to side, okay? And I'll do it. And I'll go back and forth like that for 3 minutes, take a break, 3 minutes, take a break, 3 minutes, okay? And then I'll go to my next move. So I already stretched the hamstrings. I now provided facilitation to the shoulder. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flex at the hips, okay? By leaning forward, and I'm gonna bring the arms out into extension, okay? So when I do that, I come here, and what I will do a lot of times is I will use, if I'm sitting on a plinth table, I'll use a ball and I'll put the arms on a ball and I'll have the person rocking forward. I was taught initially to use a stool that rolls. So I'd have you here, I'd have the stool right here, we'd be a little lower, and I'd have both hands on the stool and I'd be marking. So this is the way you'd be. So I'm gonna illustrate by doing this and coming forward. So both hands are on, and then I would slow. I don't go all the way down initially. Because why? Because your hamstrings are tight, which means your low back's gonna be tight, okay? So I gotta move you forward. And what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna position your head, because I want your head coming forward too, okay? So yeah, I want the head flexing, right? So I'm gonna push down, and then I'm gonna tell them, look down at the ball, or look down at the stool, okay? And I'll have them pushing forward. Now look at what I'm doing. I got the arms in extension, okay? I'm moving at the hips, okay, I'm stretching the low back muscles. I'm in a flex position at the hips. The knees are flat on the floor, okay? And we move frontwards and backwards. Now I'll also come this way, and I'll come this way. Again, facilitating the back and doing it that way. And again, riding out on a stool or whatever it is. Now, the other thing that I'll try is this. is I'll take the unaffected extremity and I'll now come forward with something reaching and setting. Now, if I can do it with both, I will. Like if I can have two hands, a ball or something else, and I can reach out and I can do this, and I can get them to extend now, breaking the flexion pattern. I'll start up grabbing the ball, I'll come here forward and I'll set the ball down. I'll come back and then set the ball down, and so on is what I do. So again, all depends. We're looking at reflex inhibiting patterns, trying to break up the tone, okay, based on using flexion and extension. Extension of the upper, okay, flexion of the lower, or vice versa, depending upon what you're looking at, okay? So NDT at its simplest version. And then, of course, we like to add function to anything that we're doing. So anytime you're doing this, okay, you should add function. So an example of that would be, I might go in the kitchen, I might have that affected extremity on the countertop, and I might extend it into extension. And what I might do is I might have them grab something from this side and reach up and put it in the cabinet. Okay, and I just went to PNF, but we're not going to go there. Okay, so at the end of the day, it's the concept: facilitation, inhibition. Okay, using reflex inhibiting positions. That's NDT.
All right, so we spent time going over NDT, Neurodevelopmental Treatment. We went through reflex inhibiting positions. We identified, some different ways to approach, the process. So, just to kind of summarize, you have to really think about sensory motor approaches. And we have NDT, we have PNF, all right, we got rude, and then we got Braunschweig.
Yep.
And then the big Mahaf, right, is motor learning. So over here, the big difference in these sensory motor approaches, as we mentioned before, is the fact that in motor learning, we have volitional content. The ability for an individual, number one, to recognize that they have a problem. Two, to actually be able to practice. Three, to be able to understand that they're making a mistake. And four, to be able to go back, and change it. So I bring this up because you have to get into a clinical reasoning mode when you're doing this, because the balance is going to be, when you go to treat, is knowing where that person is in that continuum. Because sensory motor is a lot more dependent, on the clinician, almost being the patient, the volitional element, and helping them through that process. So things to think about, when you do that. Now, we probably always should mention at the very end of it,
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. And just briefly, as you already hear me, as I'm discussing these things, you notice that I'm not the kind of guy that talks about memorizing things.
Right.
I'm really about clinical reasoning. So what's it mean to you? How does that differ from some of the different studying methods that are out there? Mnemonics, memorizing things. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, I think there's some things that it's great to have a foundational baseline knowledge of, and sometimes mnemonics are helpful for certain things, but I think it's more important to be able to take what you learn and then apply it to different scenarios. So I know at the OT Help Desk, if you join us there, we talk about mind mapping, and that's basically where you're taking a diagnosis, you're taking a sample patient, you're working your way through the clinical reasoning process, and you're making it to where you're applying this information and making it make sense for that patient versus just kind of memorizing in isolation, I would say.
And the thing that I really like is our PDFs, because our PDFs are based on the domains, and it allows us to look at the entire process from understanding diagnosis, etiology, prognosis, to then taking it to the next step of taking the client factors, which every diagnosis has, right?
Right.
An issue with the client factor, and then applying that to the assessment via your demands of whatever the person's going to have to do, your occupational performance profile, and then the intervention process. So our PDFs are written like that, and I think that's one of the reasons why students really like our PDFs. So give us a consideration, okay? And we're here if you need us, and we would love to have you come join us. All right, everyone, we'll see you later.